What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I'm bringing to you my ban list predictions for the July 2021 ban list. We're about a few weeks out now from actually receiving that ban list. Sometimes Konami drops it early, sometimes they drop it much later. Honestly, they just do whatever the hell they want. But today we're going to be talking what I personally feel like will and or should get hit on the upcoming list to kind of move us into the next part of the Yu-Gi-Oh format. We've got some new products coming out. Some people are sick of where the format has been for the past several months, and I think a lot of you guys also have your thoughts, so be sure to let me know down in the comments what you guys think, because I'd really love to hear what you think should be hit on the list as well. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. So of course we are going to start with the bans, and it's kind of weird because even though people want things to change as we move into the new format, we've kind of been having a shift at the top of the metagame because of Lightning Overdrive, the release of the new Tri-Brigade cards, the Drytron cards, and while Dragon Link has kind of been top dog for the past several months now, I think Dragon Link's probably the deck that has the biggest crosshair on its back, even though we don't actually know if it's going to be the best deck moving forward. So I think there's probably going to be a hit to Dragon Link on this list. It just makes sense. The deck has been the best for quite some time, and if Konami wants to help sell Lightning Overdrive in some of their future product, then it makes sense to hit the previous best deck, which also isn't really making them any money. And so that's why I think there is a major crosshair on Dragon Link specifically. The problem is though, what are we going to hit? Because I don't know if there's a singular card that actually does the job. A lot of people might say LP, and I would tend to agree with that, but even without LP, I feel like Dragon Link is just fine. LP is like the conduit that all of the Dragon Link plays funnel into, not even just Dragon Link, a lot of other dragon-oriented decks. And so LP kind of makes sense because it kind of just like cheats around a core mechanic of the game by allowing you to get stuff otherwise just directly from the deck that you wouldn't be able to normally. So it makes sense that that would be the card to hit, but I actually don't think that's enough. So where else can we look to, right? Another card people are discussing is the possibility of Striker Dragon, but Striker Dragon I don't feel like needs to get banned necessarily. I think maybe a limitation on Striker Dragon might be okay. Yeah, sure, you can still get your boot sector launch and it still allows you to do some initial plays, but where the limitation comes in is that it really stifles the follow-up plays if you're to get interrupted, if your board's to get broken, because then you're not able to go into numerous Striker Dragons on the follow-up. So I could possibly see a limitation there. Another thing people are discussing is the possibility of just flat out banning the baby Chaos Dragons, White Dragon Wyvern Burster, and Black Dragon Collapse Serpent, because the fact that they're this recursive little mini engine that's able to generate so much advantage, they're searchable with Chaos Space, which even though they're at 1, they're very easily searchable. I could definitely maybe see an argument for that, although I think that's probably the least likely to happen because I just don't really see them banning those cards because they're already currently limited. I feel like the LP ban or the Striker Dragon limitation are the most likely to happen, just so then Konami can at least put a nail in the coffin of this deck once and for all. People are still going to try to find ways to play it, of course, because people love dragons, but at the same time, I think this deck has been around for long enough that Konami's probably had enough of it. I say that in this video, but I feel like I've said that the last several videos, and while there were some adjustments made to the list, hitting some other cards that definitely needed to get hit, it seems like Dragon has just been able to persevere regardless. But as far as the banned cards go, I feel like Guard Dragon LP or like banning some specific piece of Dragon Link is really the only ban that makes the most sense from Konami's perspective. I don't think they're going to hit anything in Tri-Brigade, Zodiac, or Drytron because those are the two decks that they're theoretically trying to promote with Lightning Overdrive, and so as a result, I don't really see those decks really getting any sort of ban whatsoever. Over in the OCG, if you watched my latest OCG ban list video, because strangely enough, the OCG got their ban list before us, which doesn't happen too often, the OCG actually saw a ban to Zodiac Dryden, and that could also happen here for us TCG players, but we do potentially have the Utopic Future Dragon coming out in a later set, and if that does happen within the next couple months, maybe the Megatins by chance, then Konami would want to incentivize people to get that, and one of the best ways to incentivize them is to keep Zodiac around. So I don't necessarily see a hit to Dryden in the near future, at least on this upcoming ban list for the TCG. Now the OCG did semi-limit Fire Formation TENKI, which is a bit of a strange hit, but I could maybe see a limitation to Fire Formation TENKI. It doesn't necessarily hit Tri-Brigade, it just reduces the consistency for your ability to get to Fractal or use Zodiac monsters. It also does hit Zodiac Pure itself, and they don't really care about the Zodiac cards necessarily unless they're specifically looking at Future Dragon. It's more about keeping Tri-Brigade in the top position, and so maybe they could hit it, but I don't really see that there's a reason for them to do so. And the same thing goes for Drytron, right? I mean, Drytron just received some of the best support the deck could ever imagine, so do you really think they're going to hit the deck? And if so, what would they even hit? I mean, you could arguably hit like one of the consistency cards like Drytron Nova or Alpha, I guess. I guess you could maybe hit one of the other non-Drytron specific cards, so that way you're reducing consistency without taking anything away from the Drytron deck. That could be a possibility, but again, I think Konami wants these decks to be good to help sell their product, so I don't really see them getting hit. Along the same line of thinking, another approach we could take is, since we're focusing on some older best decks that may receive some hits, is to look at decks such as Invoke Shaddoll or Dinosaur. But personally, I think both of these decks are fine. The format, strangely enough, is actually somewhat diverse, even though obviously, you know, there's only a few best decks, but it's not like other decks aren't topping. If you've seen the results of extravaganzas in some of the higher tier tournaments lately, yeah, sure, it's kind of overrun by Dragon Link, by your Prank Kid, by your Drytron, as well as your Tri-Brigade Zodiac, but you're still seeing a lot of other decks in these top cuts. And so maybe you could have a limitation on Magical Meltdown to kind of reduce the consistency, stop some of the BS with Magical Meltdowns not able to respond to fusion summon bullshit. You could also maybe hit something like Miscellaneousaurus or Fossil Dig or Oviraptor to again reduce consistency, or maybe reduce some of the lack of interactivity that Miscellaneousaurus provides. But I honestly don't think, if you look at the records that these decks have as of late, that they really warrant receiving any hits whatsoever. It's also a bit difficult too, right? We just had Lightning Overdrive come out. We have King's Court coming out like around the time this ban list is supposed to drop. And so the format's still in its relative infancy. People are trying to figure out what the new best decks are. And so the fact that there's a lingering ban list coming is a little bit awkward in terms of trying to figure that out. I think what makes the most sense for them is to actually bring some cards back into the format rather than hitting any cards necessarily, aside from the ones we already discussed. I know I probably sound like a broken record at this point, but let's bring back Orcust Harp Horror. Orcust has been doing little to nothing for the past several months. There's been an Orcust Eldritch variant that has spawned, which is a really cool deck, but I think we can have one Harp Horror in the format and it's not going to be Orcust running rampant. I don't think that's possible. If anything, if Orcust becomes slightly more playable, that's great for anyone that wants to play Orcust. Same thing for Salamangreat Mirage Stallion, right? Salamangreat's actually a very viable budget deck and has actually seen some relatively small success at some of the larger tournaments that have been taking place recently. And so while it's not a top contender, it's definitely been able to play with some of the top decks. Give it one of its key pieces back. It locks you into fires. I mean, it has the restriction built in on the card. You also still only have one Gazelle, one Circle. I think we can have Mirage Stallion back and it wouldn't do anything. And I know this one is going to probably be very controversial, but I think we can also put Heavy Metal Foes Electromite back at 1. I am not a fan of Pendulum, but I think if we have cards like Isolde and Crystron Halki Fibrax legal, I think we can have Electromite legal as well. This is just a card that Pendulum desperately needs, and without it, people can't really play their Pendulum decks to any sort of competitive capacity. Yeah, you might see one here or there, but Pendulum's been almost entirely absent from the format, and in the OCG, Pendulum has Electromite and still isn't doing anything. So let's just inject it into the format, see what happens, and give people the opportunity just to play another deck in this particular format. I really don't think it would do all that much, and I really thought with the release of Ancient Guardians and that new Pendulum archetype that Konami would want to help support it in some way by bringing Electromite back, but I guess I completely missed the mark on that one. The timing of this ban list is just kind of awkward, right? Because right after the ban list, we have King's Court, we have Dawn of Majesty, we have the Megatins, which could have some impactful cards in there, and so even if the list does check some things, the new sets could just shake things up entirely. We don't really know, and so while this is around the time we typically do get a list, it's kind of awkward to do some predictions this time around. So I suppose that's it for the limited cards, although I don't exactly know which of those were predictions and just me blabbing on different tangents, but I actually do have one card on the semi-limited list this time, and that is Dynamite Knight, the True Draco Fighter. The reason for this is that Konami has slowly been releasing Draco support off of the list. They just put True King's Return back to 3 on the previous list, and so I could see the next thing that they do is put Dynamite Knight back to 2, because again, Konami loves using the semi-limited list as a sort of safeguard before they put stuff to 3, although on the last list, they put several limited cards to 3 immediately without any thought, and they really didn't do all that much, so maybe they should be doing that more often, but I just feel like Dynamite Knight to 2 is a very Konami thing to do. And then for the unlimits, I really don't have much to say here. I feel like if we were trying to completely abolish the semi-limited list, we should just move Dynamite Knight to 3 and Mally to 3, because I don't think 3 Malicious is really going to do all that much in this particular format. One card I do have going to unlimited though from the limited status, and I think this would be a big one, is Macrocosmos going to 3. This is something that the OCG has currently, and it's something that some decks are actually able to take advantage of, because being able to play macro in some decks that don't care about the graveyard going up against graveyard oriented decks is a pretty powerful powerful thing, right? And with a lot of these graveyard-oriented decks, like Dragon Link, like Drytron, like Tri-Brigade Zodiac, even Prank Kid to a degree, having access to more cards that just banish everything could force some interesting interactions and allow some decks to rise up and compete with some of these top-tier contenders. Now, yes, I do realize I'm advocating for a floodgate to go to 3 copies, and one of the most powerful ones at that, but this would force an interesting dynamic where players may actually start incorporating some sort of spell and trap removal if macro did make a big enough impact. And I think it would be something that would maybe get some people excited. I think people playing pure Zodiac would be really excited to see that if Dryden and Tenki survive the list, but I don't know. I think it's just something that we should try, and I don't really think it would have the biggest impact. I don't know. I just feel like when you look at the limited list at times, there's several cards that could move to unlimited and would probably have little to no impact in the format, or the format would shape and accommodate the fact that those cards are back. And I feel like Macro Cosmos is one of these cards. Again, the OCG has had it. They've adapted. It's fine. It's not running around in every single deck. Certain decks can play it. Most others can't because a lot of them are very graveyard reliant, but it's just another tool that non-graveyard reliant decks could take advantage of and would help maybe bring some balance to some of the top tier decks. Contradictory to that though, maybe Konami doesn't want that card to go to 3 because it goes against some of the better decks that they're trying to push the bottom line. Also keep in mind that this is more of a prediction of what I think is going to happen rather than a wish list, because I feel like if this was a wish list, this would be like an hour-long video, because I feel like there's so many different changes you could make to kind of bring some of the other decks up while also keeping some of the top decks in check and really just shaking things up and getting people truly excited about the ban list. I feel like the last few ban lists kind of did the bare minimum of what they were supposed to do, and that was great and all, but it wasn't really super exciting. I miss those good crucifixion lists like we used to get back in the day that would shift around like 30 cards on the list. That was an absolute blast, and maybe that's just a relic of older Yu-Gi-Oh! Could you imagine if we wake up July 1st, Konami drops the list, and there are hits left and right? It is an absolute massacre. Players are scrambling to try to figure out what the next best deck is. I guess maybe that might be better suited for when in-person events really return, but I kind of miss those days. So guys, that's gonna wrap it up for my ban list prediction for the July 2021 ban list. A bit of a weird one because I feel like the timing of this is a bit suspect, and it's hard to kind of identify which card should really get hit, because I feel like a lot of the top decks that some people complain about are kind of fine, and a lot of people just really want them to be hit so that we're not seeing them as often. But I don't really think that's a reason for actually wanting to hit the deck. I feel like it should be more because of the power level of it specifically. And again, if it's not really helping the bottom line and sell new product, then that's a reason Konami doesn't want to hit anything. But those are just my thoughts. I'd really love to hear what you guys think down in the comments below. Be sure to let me know what you think should get banned, limited, semi-limited for some reason, and unlimited, because I think this one's completely up in the air. If anyone can even get close to predicting what this list is going to look like, I'll be genuinely impressed, because we're never the best at doing this anyway, but I think this list is going to be very interesting for sure. But thank you all so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you found this video informative, consider supporting me on Patreon for exclusive early one-day access to both the Yu-Gi-Oh Progression series and the history of Yu-Gi-Oh. Thanks so much again, and we will see you next time.